Making something amazing once is hard. Doing it twice in a row is significantly harder. It's not uncommon for highly popular anime to go from some of the most anticipated to most disappointing with the release of a sophomore season. The second season of an anime is a major inflection point. The Devil is a Part-Timer, Blue Lock, Shield Hero, Promise Neverland. These are some of multiple examples where a show wasn't able to capture the same magic that made the first season special, or in some cases resulted in a complete collapse. But second seasons are just as much an arena to showcase how great a piece of media is, answering the question of whether or not a show's initial success was a flash in the pan, or here to stay. This is the year of highly anticipated sequels. If you go forward or back 6 months, you get sequels for shows like Frieren, Dungeon Meshi, Apothecary Diaries, Dandadan, Rascal Dreams of Bunny Girl Senpai, Solo Leveling, Kaiju No. 8, My Dress Up Darling. You get the point. There are so many good second seasons that there's very likely people already complaining in the comment section about me not including one of them in that list. I'm looking at you, Call of the Night Season 2. Someday I'll watch you, but that day is not today. And while it's a great year for sequels, it's an even better season. Summer 2025 is full of good shows. And in watching a lot of the first episodes released this week, I found myself fascinated by one second season that just ended and another that just began. A perfect example of a sequel done right. My name is Pei, and today we're talking about when a second season makes or breaks a show. There are two different stories we're going to be focusing on today. The first is Apothecary Diaries, a show that took the anime world by storm. It is hyper popular for good reason. It has a remarkable protagonist that's one of the best I've seen in a long time. I've talked about Mao Mao in the past, and I will continue to talk about her in the future. But today, I'm taking a much more controversial stance. Season 2 of Apothecary Diaries seems to be pretty well received, but I thought the second season was a step back, separating Apothecary Diaries from that upper echelon of shows that I think are truly fantastic. For me, Season 2 of Apothecary Diaries was defined by its highs and lows. On one hand, everything Mao Mao touched was still fantastic, which is a very good sign given the fact that she's the series protagonist. Pair this with a truly fascinating reveal and you get some really interesting moments. Its art direction was still very good, but everything else seemed to work a little worse. Second seasons have this unique challenge where they're dealing with higher expectations from an audience and having to implement either something new or increase quality. Because when shows are initially released, setup is expected, but when you end on a high note, an escalation of plot, and then go back to a slower pace, it'll feel more jarring. There are multiple reasons why I struggled so much with this season. Take, for example, its late introduced villain that feels like a cardboard cutout. Nope, actually worse than that. The character wasn't two-dimensional, it was a single dot. That mixed with pacing that really struggled, emulating that of the first season except not working nearly as well, led to me feeling like Apothecary Diaries Season 2 wasn't necessarily bad, it was just disappointing. There's still a part of me as I edit this video and look at all these clips that loves this story. Shows are more often defined by their peaks, and Apothecary Diaries has plenty, but man, the parts in between feel like they've gotten in the way of that more and more. Now with the second show I'm talking about today, I feel like it did the exact opposite. It took a great start and somehow found a way to make it even better. In a stacked season with many highly anticipated shows, somehow the one that stands out to me the most after its first episode is My Dress Up Darling. Now a quick disclaimer for those who haven't watched the show yet. This story is incredibly heavy-handed in its use of fan service. If you're a normal human being that hasn't been desensitized by years and years of anime's overt use of fan service, just be aware that this is probably the most extreme example I'd ever talk about in a video. And part of the reason I want to talk about this show, when I would avoid other ones that look very similar on paper, is because the writing is so good that I think it recontextualizes the use of fan service and its purpose in the story. Because past that initial impression is a show that demonstrates a deep care for its fantastic characters. It explores the big, complicated emotions that come with young love with a lot of respect. For me, this story feels very nostalgic, and I think it teaches lessons around respect and navigating complicated emotions in a way that I didn't have a lot of access to when I was younger. That's a really tricky line to walk. But for me, the fantastic execution and writing lands on the right side of that line. And because that's hard to pull off, I think that this makes it a very unique piece of media. I think there's an online sentiment, especially from female viewers and creators, that this fan service anime feels different. It's still very indulgent, but the entire time it feels like they're functioning within characters' comfort levels. Fanservice normally feels like the opposite, voyeuristic and specifically invasive. One of my favorite examples of this great writing is the way My Dress Up Darling uses its quote-unquote beach episode. Beach episodes are a common trope in anime used to take a break from the primary plotline and also as an excuse to see characters in bikinis. Now, in season 1 of My Dress Up Darling, they have their own beach episode, except it's not a full episode, it's just 7 minutes at the end of one. And if you've seen any of my previous videos, you'll know that I love when stories are able to do a lot with very little time. While My Dress Up Darling is filled with fan service, the beach episode has very little. Instead, it focuses on the two main characters and their dynamic. Wakana Gojo and Marin Kitagawa are this show's leads. They're both high school students with counterculture interests. Gojo wants to follow in his grandfather's footsteps and make Hina dolls, whereas Marin has a deep passion for anime and its more lewd counterparts. She has dreams of cosplaying all her favorite characters, but very little ability to actually make the costumes. Because of a moment when he was shamed when he was younger, Gojo's very protective of his passions, and instead of giving up on them, decided to just separate himself from his peers. Kitagawa's the exact inverse, proud and unapologetic of all of her passions. The story is about their budding relationship as they start to build cosplays together. Their character arcs are built around the ways they grow and change in experiencing new things and doing this together, and that's demonstrated really beautifully in this beach episode. Gojo is a character that has dedicated himself to a single pursuit, but at one point in the story he's given a piece of advice from his grandfather, that widening his experiences and trying new things will help in everything he does, especially painting Hina dolls. And given his past experiences and anxiety, Kitagawa's almost rude bluntness is a welcome force. It pushes him outside of his comfort zone a healthy amount, encouraging him to try all these new things that he finds truly fulfilling and engaging. There's some really beautiful use of metaphor demonstrating this in the beach scene. To celebrate after finals, they go to the beach together, Gojo assuming it has something to do with taking backlit photos. At one point, Kitagawa decides to go in the water and convinces Gojo to follow her. And you get all these little moments that are exceptionally animated and so expressive, before, after a moment of hesitation, he steps into the water. And he freaks out a little bit, to which Kitagawa jokingly asks, "What is this, your first time?" And he says, "Yeah." Because ever since he was a kid, he's loved painting Hina dolls and practicing his craft. There's so many things he hasn't done, and they're all a little bit scary and nerve-wracking. But Kitagawa makes it easy to try new things. Another interesting use of metaphor in this scene is food. Throughout the story, it's demonstrated that one of the things Kitagawa loves most in the world is eating. So when they show up to the beach with some burgers and fries, and a bird swoops in and steals some of it, Gojo decides to grab a burger and throw it at the bird as a distraction before they make a break for it. An impromptu, charming little moment, made more significant by the fact that up until this point, the only times Gojo has taken the lead and been assertive is when it had to do with his craft. It's a really important moment demonstrating his growth, and it's done so well. Part of what makes My Dress Up Darling work as a show for me when I thought it wouldn't is the care and respect the writing and creators demonstrate in the execution of the story. It feels like both the original writer and those that worked on the anime adaptation have a care and delicacy with these characters that reminds me a lot of like an older sibling protecting a younger one. And to me, that's a major part of what makes this increased quality with the release of season 2 so exciting. Because they're doing the very difficult task of taking an already fantastic story and building on the momentum. In the sequel, finding ways to make changes and enhance the magic that made the first season so special. So what are those changes? So the obvious initial standouts are the animation and production quality. My Dress Up Darling was already a very pretty show, but season 2 episode 1 had a noticeable increase in effort, creating an incredibly polished and stylized product. For example, I love this scene where Kitagawa is quoting some of her favorite characters and they have it matched to like manga panels. Or something like this camera movement that's incredibly hard to animate but commonplace in live action. Every scene has a little gimmick where they mix in all this style with fantastic realism. But the style bleeds into everything, even in the more realistic scenes like this one where Marin's sitting on a train. And while the directing for this show has always been fantastic, with multiple standout scenes from season 1, it feels like there's way more to play with all this great animation. Something else worth bringing up is that this wasn't the arc that season 1 of the anime left off on. meaning they chose to rearrange some of the following manga chapters because they thought it might make for a better story. And it does, tying this back into Apothecary Diaries, where the pacing felt slow and a little bit stagnant compared to the big finale. My Dress Up Darling's first episode of the second season covers so many different fun parts of the story. One of the benefits of adaptation, which most anime is that you get to make changes in retrospect. But one of the difficulties is working with the predetermined expectations of the fanbase. It's hard to make changes from the source material, but in some ways if you refuse to do so, you're limiting one of the huge benefits of adaptation. But one of the main reasons I wanted to make this comparison is because there's this thing that My Dress Up Darling does consistently that's outstanding. This whole story is built around cosplay, and for Kitagawa that comes from a deep passion for stories and characters, which means the story will work a lot better if you can understand that love for those characters and anime. So when they make up these in-universe shows that they're cosplaying, they as a standalone product are outstanding. All of these fake shows feel like they could be real ones, because in the briefest amount of screen time, somehow My Dress Up Darling makes me care more about these fake shows and characters than Apothecary Diaries did with some of its secondary characters, and especially their villains. Oh my gosh. It boggles my mind just how immersive My Dress Up Darling is at times. And the second season starts with that gimmick taken to a whole nother level. That's incredibly difficult. People struggle to make one good show, let alone extra ones in the one they're already making. And it just gives me so much faith that they're going to continue the trajectory they've already set. Saying second seasons can make or break a show is a bit melodramatic, especially when I'm talking about My Dress Up Darling, which I think is outstanding, and Apothecary Diaries, which I think is middling but good. The fact that like any good collaborative art is made ever is kind of actually impressive. If you've ever looked behind the scenes to see what it's like to make anime, it's shocking how difficult the industry is. Directors are constantly bouncing between projects, people are underpaid, anime itself in many cases isn't even that profitable. It's an industry built off of the foundation of overwork and passion. So when things come together perfectly and that passion is represented in something that you just are blown away by, it feels like such a privilege. At the start of this video, I talked about how this is a highly anticipated year because we're finally getting follow-ups on so many different shows that I think audiences have fallen in love with. And if you loved season 2 of Apothecary Diaries, the point of this video was not at all to tell you you're wrong. I just wanted to explore these two shows that both shocked my expectations, to try to put to words and understand better my experience. Because I find myself excited by so many different shows this season, and at the top of them is My Dress Up Darling. Not what I expected, but we're in the season of sequels, and we're just getting started. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next week.